This is a kind of a fundamental concept, and we've been using them without you necessarily understanding that they're being used. So I alluded to this in the very beginning when I was talking about the Unix philosophy, that you have to assume that the output of any program could be the input to another program. And the way that this is accomplished, the way those two things are kind of like connected together, is through something called streams and pipes. So you'll have one stream of characters, and you'll pipe that into another stream of characters. So a good example of that is, I'm going to make another folder. We'll just call this like streams. I'm going to go into streams. And let's say I have a string of text, and I want that to be output to another file. What I can do is I can say echo, this is my text, right? So if I say that, right, that outputs it to the standard out pipe, right? Or to the stream, the standard out stream. And if you don't have a stream that goes anywhere, it eventually just says like, cool, well, I'm just going to output that to the user, right? So that's kind of the terminus, is it showing that to the user. But let's say I wanted to put that text into a file. So I can do that echo, this is my text. And then if I put 1 and then an angle bracket like that, I'm going to redirect that stream to another place into a new file. So now notice, first of all, it didn't output that to my screen, so it never echoed anything. But now I have this new file.txt, and if I cat that file, you'll see that my text went into that. That's pretty cool, right? So I'm redirecting that output from hitting the screen to going into a file. This is the standard out. So 1 and then angle bracket redirects just standard out. It doesn't redirect anything else, it just redirects standard out. So what happens if I do cat new file.txt, but instead of letting that go to my screen, I redirect that to another file.txt. What do you think that's going to happen then? I just copied the file, right? Like I basically just did copy. So if I cat another file now, this is my text, but I just redirected that from the standard out from going to the screen into another file. So it's basically a poor man's copy. Okay, so if I do this again, where I have new file.txt, but if I put a second angle bracket there, what it does, instead of replacing the file, it appends to the file, right? So now if I look inside of another file.txt, this is my text shows up in there twice. Whereas if I did it with just one of these, it's just once now, because what I actually did is I said, throw everything out you had before, replace it with new stuff. So 2 of them adds and 1 of them replaces. Okay, so that is standard out. Everything that I've shown you so far is you're basically redirecting the output of a file, or the output of a program. And you can do it with anything, right? So I can do ls-lsa, and I want to redirect that to ls.txt, right? And now if I go into ls.txt, it's just the output of that. Something that's kind of interesting, if I just do cat, or sorry, if I do ls into ls.txt, so if I do ls right now, it does it this way, where it's just like 1 file per line. If there's a directory in there, it'll actually colorize that for me. But right now, if I cat ls.txt, notice that they're on new lines, and no color would ever show up here. That's because a program can detect that it's being redirected, and it can actually like reformat itself to be more machine friendly, right? And so this is a more machine friendly, where it's 1 file per line. It's kind of interesting. So let's talk about standard error for just a second. So we've just been looking at standard out, which is like output of a particular program. There's another stream that we're also reading from at the same time called standard error. So let's try this again. Let's say if I say cat non-existent file.txt, I get a, hey, that thing that you asked for doesn't exist. But what happens if I try and redirect the standard out of that to cat.txt? Well, notice that I still see the error message and nothing went to cat.txt. Why is that? Well, we directed standard out, which is where all the output goes, and there was no output because that was not a real file. It does create the file because it assumes that stuff is going to end up going there. But we still saw the error output come out here, wherever that was, here. That's because standard out and standard error are different. Standard error is just for errors and like things like that, so it's actually frequently useful to redirect standard out somewhere. This will be like all of your reporting and metrics and all that kind of stuff, maybe for like your server, if you're running a server that way. And then you can redirect standard error somewhere else, and this will be like your error logs, right? And that's why they kind of separate those two things out. So if I can do this now, so instead of being a 1 here, I can redirect this to be a 2, which is going to be standard error. And then I'll send this to error.txt. So now I have error.txt, and if I cat error.txt, you'll see that the error message actually ended up going there. Make sense? So again, 1 angle bracket redirects standard out, 2 angle bracket redirects standard error, and yeah. So actually that's a good point, is you can actually do both of them at the same time. So if I do ls-lsa like that, and I can do 1 to ls.txt, and I can do 2 to ls-error.txt, and that's frequently what you'll see is you'll redirect standard out one place, you'll redirect standard error a different place, and they just go to their kind of separate ways. Well, what happens if I want them to go to the same place? You can actually just leave the number off like that, and that'll redirect both standard out and standard error to the same place. So unless I'm doing something where I specifically want to separate the streams, I'll usually just do this. And I'll just redirect everything to one file. Keep in mind that if I wanted to append to that, that's how I would do that. And you can also do that with 2 as well, where you can append to the error file, right? So that the multiple error brackets always works. So let's say I was doing something and I only cared about the standard out and I just didn't care what was happening in the errors whatsoever. You can do ls-lsa, and I can just redirect the errors to /dev/null. This is a special file here that basically says, I'm going to throw it, and it's just a black hole of stuff, and stuff is going to go into it, and like, don't save it, don't care about it, it's just into oblivion. So if I did this, if there was any errors, I wouldn't see them. And by the same token, if I want to run a program and I don't care about the output and I just want to know if there was any errors, same thing here. I can redirect standard out to dev null, and only errors will show up here. So let's say if I did here cat some file.txt, I did see the error here, and that's how I know an error happened. But same thing here, if I change this to 2, I'm just not going to see anything because it's going to ignore all the errors. So that's what dev null is for. Dev null is specifically for, I don't care about whatever is going into here.